Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football, continuing with our 2022 season previews as we head back to the ACC and we take a look at the Florida State Seminoles, a team that obviously got off to a rough tenure with Mike Norvell. The COVID year, it was just choppy. You could tell it was choppy. Last year started out 0-4, but noticeably better team down the stretch, and that's really what's optimistic about Mike Norvell is those guys didn't stop playing for him. And this year, I have a lot of optimism that they can take another step, potentially a 7-5, 8-4 win season, because this team has a lot to like about. Before we get into it, just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support you guys have shown the channel. If you guys do like the content and you like talking college football, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate all the support. And it's been a blast talking with you guys in the comment section. You guys are teaching me a lot about your teams. So in the comment section, let me know what players I'm sleeping on, what players I need to keep an eye on. I appreciate that. And let's talking some Florida State football. It's going to start with the quarterback, Jordan Travis, a guy who has been significantly better every single year. And if you look at when he took over as QB1 full-time and they stopped flip-flopping quarterbacks, which is the worst way to manage a quarterback room, I get it was inconsistent, but you have to let a guy get into the game flow. It's not good for his confidence. It's not good for how fluid the offense runs when you're having two different guys run in and off for two different possessions. Just was choppy. But when Jordan Travis took over, 11 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, 150 passer rating on October 2nd through the rest of the season, he looked way better. He's looked way better since he started playing his first time a couple of years ago. And Jordan Travis, you are optimistic that he's going to take another step as the full-time quarterback one. Now, are we asking Jordan Travis to be a pocket passer? No, that's not his game. His game is he's one of the best athletes on the field. He's got electric running ability. He can create outside the pocket, but you do need to have some semblance of a guy who can hit guys when they're open, throw from the pocket, and he is showing progressions to get to that point. And quite honestly, he looked that part towards the end of the year last year. I think the bigger issue with this passing game and this offense as a whole is the weakness at wide receiver. The wide receiver play was, from what I've seen out of Florida State, rewatching some games, preparing for this episode, was just downright bad. They didn't have a guy that they could go to for explosive plays. You look at some of their leading receivers. Their leading guy in receptions was Ja'Shawn Corbin with 25 catches. Their second guy was Cameron McDonald, and the fourth guy was Trayshawn Ward in receptions. I mean, they were relying on running backs and tight ends through the passing game, and that really hinders your explosive ability. And we talk about an offense and their ability to be explosive a lot, because when you're looking at a college football offense, it's really hard to go 12, 14 plays, 75-yard touchdown drives. It's just hard to not have those negative plays, which is something Florida State really struggled with. Last year, they were 11th worst in negative yards, giving up 351 tackles for a loss or sack yardage. I mean, that is abysmal. And for a team that wants to run the football, wants to stay on schedule and allow Jordan Travis to have those easier throws, that's just unacceptable. Now, what are the wide receivers this year that's going to come in and give some explosive nature to this offense? They went to the portal, and I think largely because the guys that they had in the room, they didn't really believe in. A guy like Micah Pittman, if you were a Florida State fan and you watched the spring game, this dude has some serious juice. He's a former top 100 recruit coming over from Oregon. If you can get him the ball in space, he is very, very natural running after the catch. He's a polished route runner too, but I think his juice comes from getting him the ball in space and letting him create after the catch, because that is where he seems the most comfortable in. A guy like Winston Wright, you're excited about, but obviously with the injury, you're not really sure what he's going to look like if he plays at all. That hurt because I really liked Winston Wright out of West Virginia. And then a guy like Johnny Wilson, who in his own right was a top 120 recruit in his class, was at Arizona State, coming over to Florida State, inconsistent in the spring from what I've been reading, but 6'7", he's got a big frame. He should definitely help out in the red zone, where Florida State actually was really good last year. But they went to the portal to get some of those playmakers. Now, they have some guys who are returning that you feel good about, Ontario Wilson, Malik McClain, guys that were decent, but you can tell that Mike Norvell and that staff wanted to go outside the program to get some of that talent, and that's what they did. Now, at the running back position, this is a much better unit that doesn't have as many question marks. You obviously lose a guy like Jay Sean Corbin, who was very good for Florida State last year. But they got three guys that I feel really, really good about, starting with the transfer Trey Benson from Oregon. Again, if you watch the spring game, he looked like probably the best running back on the team. You got Trayshawn Ward coming back, and then a guy that's kind of like the ace of this offense, the X factor, in Lawrence Tufale. The guy last year when I was doing Florida State previews, 9.5 yards per carry. I wanted him to get the ball more. I hope he gets the ball more, but he's a guy that can hit a home run from anywhere on the field. So throw him in there as well. Those are three capable guys who you feel good about giving handoffs to. It's a good room, and that run game should be good, pending the offensive line play, which wasn't good last year, but they're returning most of their guys, and a lot of them were younger guys who you feel good about taking that step, starting with left tackle Robert Scott Jr., who is a bona fide potential first-round draft pick, really, really talented. Then they also go to the transfer portal to bolster up that depth. Caden Lyles from Wisconsin. Can't go wrong getting interior offensive linemen from Wisconsin. They are normally pretty good. Got a guy like Bless Harris, who I believe comes from the FCS ranks from Lamar. He's a big guy. I think he goes 320, 6'5", 320. He should help in the run game. You feel good about some of the guys you bring in. And then Dylan Gibbons, kind of that the anchor of that offense who's going to be a good interior offensive lineman. I think this unit takes steps because they return a lot of guys and they bring in some guys you're excited about. And they're deeper, they're healthier. And so if this offensive line can be solid, give Jordan Travis some good pockets to throw in, open up some run games, I think this offense could be good. Now the defense, I'm actually very, very high on this defense and who they have coming back. You obviously start with the defensive line. We start with them a lot because when it comes down to it, the most important stat in my mind for a college football defense is how well can you create those havoc plays, those negative plays, the sacks, the tackles for loss. And that largely starts with the defensive line. And you lose a guy who I thought should have been a top 10 pick in Jermaine Johnson. You go back and watch Jermaine Johnson last year. There was like barely reps that he lost. I mean, he was a dominant force, 17.5 TFLs, 11.5 sacks. Just a really, really talented guy. He's going to hurt to lead the program. There's a bunch of guys on this Florida State defense that you feel good about. We start with the transfer Jared Verse from Albany, who I can understand the concerns about jumping from not just FCS to Power 5, but FCS to high-level ACC football. That is a couple of jumps in talent you're going to be facing. But he looks the part. I mean, you take a look at him in the spring game, he looks like a dominant force. And if he can be, I'm not asking him to be Jermaine Johnson, but if he can be a 10-sack year guy, this defensive line is going to be good because the guys on the interior I absolutely love. Probably one of the best duo interior defensive linemen in the country, and Fabian Lovett. Now I'm forgetting the other guy's name. Robert Cooper, excuse me. Fabian Lovett and Robert Cooper, both guys who I liked in the spring game. They're both coming back. Really, really good players on the interior. And then you have a couple guys that you're excited about on the end. Derek McClendon didn't look good in the spring game. I was happy about him. And then Dennis Briggs, who moved from the interior spot back out to the edge. 3-4 guys on the edge that you feel good about getting after the passer. Couple that with some really big-time hammers on the interior defensive line. The unit should be good. Is it going to be better than a unit that had Jermaine Johnson last year? Probably not, but the other two phases of this team probably going to be good. You look at the linebacker spot, a spot that just you didn't feel great about last year. That was probably the weakest part of this defense. Kalen DeLoach looked really good towards the end of the year. And then you bring in a guy, Tatum Bethune, who at UCF, over 100 tackles last year, a little bit undersized, but he just finds the football. And that's something that linebackers at Florida State kind of have failed to do. And you throw guys like DJ Lundy, Amari Gaynor. Amari Gaynor is a guy that I really, really liked a couple years ago. Hasn't quite put it together, but he's kind of an X factor on that linebacker spot who could be really, really good for them. And then at the secondary in my mind seems to be a lot of really good players that you just got to come together and play some good football. Starting with the safety positions, probably one of the best safety duos also in the country. Akeem Dent, who is a guy that, Akeem Dent, really, really good football player. Jamie Robinson, 4 interceptions last year. 2 guys that you feel really, really good about at the safety spot. And then at the cornerback spot, You have a guy in Brown Lee who transfers out. That's not ideal, but some guys who can really, really step up. Renardo Green, I like a lot, and then Kevin Knowles. You get Greedy Vance from Louisville. Then you have two guys who, again, I hate to use the word X Factor 3 times in an episode, but Sam McCall, a guy that is a top 50 recruit. You feel really good about. He looks the part as a guy who can contribute. And then Nazir Thomas, two true freshmen who might not play early, but they'll get on the field because they are phenomenal athletes who look the part. Probably one of the best two athletes in that secondary for Florida State. So it's a group that has the talent. They just need to come together and play some good football. Now, how we normally finish out these season previews, we're going to take a look at the schedule. You guys get a look at my mug real quick. Florida State is a tough out-of-conference schedule, obviously playing Louisville. They open up against the Cane, and that's kind of a game where you just want to see your guys play some good football. They should win that relatively easy. And then they go to New Orleans and play LSU. It's a neutral site game, but it's obviously in Louisiana. That's going to be a hard game. They are 4.5-point underdogs. But if you're going to play LSU at any time in the season, you want to play them early because Brian Kelly comes in. They have a lot of new faces. A lot of people left the program through the transfer portal. A lot of people come into the program through the transfer portal. It's going to be really hard for Brian Kelly to get all those guys playing together in their first game of the season. And so you're excited about that potential upset. That's a red Sharpie game because LSU, as much talent as they have, they're playing in Louisiana. There's a lot of new faces on that team. Then you get a bye week. Louisville, again, if this Florida State team is as good as we think they can be, they should have a good chance to go on the road and beat Louisville. Boston College, Wake Forest. Wake Forest is going to be a tough one. NC State's a tough one, and Clemson. That was 3 back-to-back games. If you can win 2 out of 3, 1 out of 3, you're looking pretty good because it gets a little easier towards the end. You're off, and then you got Georgia Tech, Miami on the road, which will be a fun one, Syracuse, Louisiana, and Florida. So this is a very, very tough schedule. Obviously playing Miami across division, Florida out of conference, LSU out of conference, 2 SEC opponents out of conference while you're playing in a very, very strong ACC. It's not going to be an easy season for Mike Norvell, but this team has the talent to be an 8-win season. They just need to kind of put it together and be a little bit more consistent, which has been the bugaboo for Florida State for a while now. And so this Florida State team, it's going to be fun to see where they're at because they play a lot of fun games. And you think about Florida State last year, they were part of probably my favorite game of the college football season last year when Notre Dame came opening week. That was an electric game. Florida State can bang with any of these teams in the country. They don't really get blown out because they're capable of beating anybody. They just are also capable of beating themselves. So that'll do it for our Florida State preview as usual. Thank you guys for checking us out. If you guys do like the content, subscribe to the channel. Then let me know in the comment section what players I should be keeping an eye on because I probably didn't cover them all. Appreciate you guys checking us out, and we'll talk.